أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين نحمده ونستعينه ونستنصره ونستغفره ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الملك وله الحمد وهو على كل شيء قدير وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وآل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وآل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وآل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم اجعل مماتنا ممات محمد وآل محمد ومحياينا محياي محمد وآل محمد يا أبا عبد الله إني سلم لمن صالمكم وحرب لمن حاربكم إلى يوم القيامة سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. It is the holy month of Muharram, and for the last 2 years it has been hard not to wake up and read the news and feel that we are reliving the great tragedy of Karbala over and over again on a daily basis. From Dropsite News reported last night from Nasser Hospital, surrounded from 3 sides, snipers firing into compound. A medical team inside Gaza's Nasser Hospital says the facility is now surrounded by Israeli forces from the south, west, and east. Gunfire is hitting inside the compound and patients arriving at the ER to show injuries consistent with direct sniper fire, not warning shots. Gunshots are striking the facility itself. According to staff inside the guest quarters, personnel have been told to stay away from windows and balconies. One patient was shot in the back while standing near the administrative building. Another was reportedly shot in the head, with similar cases seen in recent hours. Patients at the field hospital tents are now being evacuated by ambulance as a precaution. Israeli quadcopters are circling overhead, and artillery and sniper fire continue intermittently. The gunfire appears to be coming from settled positions, not from advancing troops. And from the medical staff themselves at the Nasser Medical Complex in Gaza. They say, "We are working now in the hospital, and the tanks are only a few meters away from us. We are closer to death than to life. The soldiers show no mercy, not to a child, nor an elder, nor a doctor, or a nurse. We remain here because we are human, and our mission is humanitarian. If these ravens snatch our lives, don't forget us. Don't turn us into numbers. We love life. We have dreams just like you. We have children and spouses we love deeply. But to be truly human means not abandoning those who need your humanity. Tell the world about us. Tell them that we were more human than those who only claim to be. Tell them we chose death over abandoning our noble mission. Do not call us heroes. Just tell them we understood what it truly means to be human. It was a blessing to get to know you all. Forgive us. We are not numbers." It's hard to know how to deliver the khutbah that's in my heart through the facility of my tongue. I ask for your forgiveness if I do not communicate what I hoped to communicate. The story of Karbala is very well known and well attested to. And given that this is a khutbah, I cannot get into too much detail in terms of background information, so you will forgive me. After the killing of virtually the entire family of the Prophet from the Hassani line and the Husseini line, but for a very small number of survivors. Of course, the women and the children were not fully spared, but to somewhat they were spared. And when Zaynab, the sister of Imam al-Hussein and the daughter of Fatima al-Zahra and Ali ibn Abi Talib and the granddaughter of the Prophet ﷺ, was taken to Kufa from Karbala. Kufa is, of course, very close to Karbala. The governor, the Umayyad governor, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, brought all of the women and children and began to mock them, including Zaynab, and he goaded her. And he said to her, كيف رأيتِ صنع الله بأخيك وأهل بيتك? Which means, how did you see, or what do you make of the way Allah has done, or what Allah has chosen to do with your brother and your household? Meaning, what do you make of this? What do you make of the fact that you opposed us, the caliphate of the Umayyad dynasty, or the beginning of the Umayyad dynasty, and that God chose to kill you all for your lack of obedience to the Khalifa of God? كيف رأيتِ? How did you see it? The very famous response that many have come to know is the response, ما رأيت إلا جميلة. I saw nothing but beauty. I saw nothing but beauty. This is a really fascinating statement. A fascinating statement, a fascinating reaction to seeing the horrible violence. And not just the violence, but the blasphemy of so brutally and totally shedding the blood of the household of the Prophet, the living representatives of his sunnah and his character and even his genetics. It's funny to think that we Muslims today are in awe if someone says that they have a hair of the Prophet, or a footstep of the Prophet, or perhaps an article of clothing of the Prophet, and it is so carefully safeguarded in museums, whether or not it actually belonged to the Prophet or not. Just even the idea that it might be belonging to the Prophet requires that level of care. But think now of the blasphemy in this level of violence and disregard and contempt for the holy household. Now, something that bothers me about the way that this response is received, and about the way that sometimes those who have done their best to safeguard the types of literature that may give us a window into what it looked like in those moments, in those moments in which Imam al-Hussein and his companions were killed, or the reactions thereafter, which were incredibly important, by Zaynab in particular. One of the issues that comes up is this statement in particular, مَا رَأَيْتُ إِلَّا جَمِيلًا, that I saw nothing but beauty. Some say that it does not show up until much later in the historical sources and records. It shows up some 600 years later or 500 years later, depending, and that there is no sanad, there's no particular chain of transmission that is relating this back specifically to the earliest sources that we have, that people like Tabari and Baladuri rely on, like, for example, Abu Makhnaf, for example, which is probably the closest, most earliest source that we have. Though, in fact, the other thing to remember about Abu Makhnaf is Abu Makhnaf's collection was lost and or destroyed, and Tabari did his best to maintain as many of the reports from that work. Whether he had the full work or not, I don't know. But much of what we know about those early sources from Abu Makhnaf are found in Tabari and other Sunni sources, earlier Sunni sources in terms of the study of history. But here's something that comes up, is that when citing these responses that Zaynab has to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, in Sunni circles, they may refer to almost the same exact conversation minus this initial statement of مَا رَأَيْتُ إِلَّا جَمِيلًا. And then she continues and says, these were those who were chosen by Allah to oppose you, under the threat of death, and you will meet them on the Day of Judgment, and it will be settled between you then. But what bothers me is this small line. There's two versions. Either it doesn't have that beginning part, or it says مَا رَأَيْتُ إِلَّا خَيْرًا, I saw nothing but what was good, khayr. And then this version, مَا رَأَيْتُ إِلَّا جَمِيلًا, which sometimes is passed off and says that belongs to the historian Ibn Tawus. Ibn Tawus was less of a historian. He was more of a Shi'i eulogist, and he wanted more so to popularize things so that people would connect emotionally with the message and that they would cry and then therefore pick up good deeds and sawab and this kind of stuff. A bit unfair. It's a bit unfair. Given that Ibn Athir was a contemporary to Ibn Tawus's Al-Luhuf, it's a bit unfair because there's a lot to consider there. If Ibn Tawus was quoting from earlier sources in the Illa Jamila version, and you write it off as being a devotional work, then what are you saying about Ibn Tawus? What are you saying about Ibn Tawus? The subject matter looks almost exactly the same, but for one sentence. And everyone that's quoting it, all of the historians, are quoting from an earlier historian whose works we don't fully have anymore that we can definitely cross-reference. So, are you telling me that it's more likely that Ibn Tawus decided to insert his own random sentence to make this huge stand that Zaynab courageously makes against the killer of her brother better, more interesting? How do you make something more interesting? How do you draw someone in more when Zaynab's words are plain enough, are smart enough? In fact, Ibn Athir, the early historian, the Sunni historian, says in his biography of Zaynab that her speech or speeches are well attested to, and everyone knows them. And she was the pinnacle of intellect and the pinnacle of courageousness on that day. So it seems to me that all of the historians knew very, very well, and that these speeches were known amongst the people very well. And we have to think that it's likely, in fact, the oral transmissions of these speeches that kept these memories alive, given the fact that we're absolutely certain that the Umayyads would not have wanted these conversations memorialized in the books of history. They would make them look bad. So it makes sense. But all of this aside, it's also unfair to Zaynab and to Imam al-Hussein. It's unfair to pluck that and throw it out. A contemporary speaker recently decided to talk about Zaynab, and he neglected to pronounce this version. Though he chose a Shi'i narration to espouse, he dropped that part or opted to go for ما رأيت إلا خيرا instead of ما رأيت إلا جميلة, thinking that that's going to make it more Sunni or more authentic. Or no, it's unfair. It's unfair to Zaynab. It's unfair because if it wasn't for her standing up in the court of Ibn Ziyad and speaking in such a memorable way, people would not have remembered. If she just responded in a forgettable way of, oh yes, you'll meet on the Day of Judgment, would they have remembered? They all remembered that part, nonetheless. No, Zaynab courageously spoke up. And one of the other reasons that I think it's really unfair to Zaynab is because she's one of the earliest female voices that showed the quality and the character of Muslim women. And it was precisely that reason that the Umayyads underestimated the family of the Prophet. They thought if they destroy and murder all of the men, nothing would remain of the story and the position. But it was the women folk who kept it alive. And in the very court of their possible murderers, told them in a way that no one could ever forget. For me, ما رأيت إلا جميلة. I saw nothing but beauty. But we run into a snag. What does that mean? ما رأيت إلا خيرا. I saw nothing but khair. I saw nothing but beauty. When you look at the carnage and the blasphemy that is taking place in Gaza now, could you say, ما رأيت إلا جميلة? حتى ما رأيت إلا خيرا. I saw nothing but goodness. We have to judge the statements of the Ahlul Bayt not just from chains of transmission. We have to understand their personalities in the context, in the greater context of all of the things that they have said. You have to judge what Zaynab's father said by going through report after report after report of all of his speeches and learn his pattern of speech and the kinds of points that he would make in order to know Zaynab and to recognize Ali's voice in Zaynab's voice. And if you spend enough time, you will be able to tell the difference of the voice, whether it's inserted or whether it is fabricated. But the other measure is the Qur'an. The greater your relationship with the Qur'an, the closer your relationship with the Prophet and his holy household. And the closer your relationship with the Prophet and his holy household, the greater your relationship with the Qur'an. And through the Qur'an, we will investigate this statement, ما رأيت إلا جميلة. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. خب، ما رأيت إلا جميلة. I saw nothing but beauty. To what surah might I connect this? I chose Surah Al-Tur because of its very end verses, the most beautiful end verses. واصبر لحكم ربك فإنك بأعيننا وسبح بحمد ربك حين تقوم ومن الليل فسبحه وإدبار النجوم. واصبر لحكم ربك فإنك بأعيننا. Have perseverance and patience. Have perseverance and patience, for you are in God's eye. إنك بأعيننا. You are in God's eye. وسبح بحمد ربك حين تقوم. And exalt Him and remember Him as you wake and you begin your day. وَمِنَ اللَّيْلِ فَسَبِّحْهُ وَإِدْبَارَ النُّجُومِ. And in the night, and under the lights of the stars, فَسَبِّحْهُ. Exalt His praise. Remember Him, have hamd and shukr. Engage in dhikr. Engage in remembrance. And feel connection. And come under His eye or in His eye with your remembrance. وَاصْبِرْ لِحُكْمِ رَبِّكَ فَإِنَّكَ بِأَعْيُنِنَا. This is in the Surah Al-Tur. What's amazing about this, there's many things that are amazing about this surah, but there is another verse, or there's two verses, verse 15 and 16, that I think very interestingly relate to the dhikr, or the two verses at the very end. أَفَسِحْرٌ هَذَا أَمْ أَنْتُمْ لَا تُبْصِرُونَ. Is this magic, as you say, because they would call the Prophet a magician because of his revelation? Or do you not see? Do you lack basira? Do you lack vision? Do you lack sight? إِسْلَوْهَا فَاصْبِرُوا أَوْ لَا تَصْبِرُوا سَوَاءٌ عَلَيْكُمْ. Whether you are patient, or whether you are perseverant, or whether you have thick skin, and you are able to endure the heat, سَوَاءٌ عَلَيْكُمْ is no different, doesn't matter. It's all the same. إِنَّمَا تُجْزَوْنَ مَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. You will receive the reward or the recompense of all that you have done. You will be made accountable. Regardless if you think that this action that I have done, yeah, maybe it's not the greatest, but you know what? I'm a tough guy. I can handle the heat. No. فَاصْبِرُوا وَلَا تَصْبِرُوا أَوْ لَا تَصْبِرُوا سَوَاءٌ عَلَيْكُمْ. Keep this in mind here. We said about being in God's eye. We talked about remembrance, dhikr, and we're talking here about vision. Vision, patience and perseverance. And dhikr. Dhikr, sabr and basira. How do these relate? And how do they relate to مَا رَأَيْتُ إِلَّا جَمِيلًا, I saw nothing but beauty? Let us quickly examine the first 7 verses of the surah. It's an amazing construction and puzzle. وَالطُّورِ. By the mountain of development, by the mountain of human development, your anchor in life is to develop your humanity. Mountains represent anchoring. And for me, Surah Al-Tur, or the Tur Sina, represents moral human development. Thus, what one is anchored in ought to give us the tools and capacity to develop humanistic values and moral progress. It's also important to note how mountains are developed. The earth moves much like the sea does, but extremely slower in comparison to the waves. Nonetheless, these tectonic plates crash into one another and create land waves, just like the water in the sea does, resulting in mountains. This is very connected to verse 6, وَالْبَحْرِ الْمَسْجُورِ. وَكِتَابٌ مَسْطُورٌ. the Quranic revelation and all of the preceding revelations. في رق منشور. The revelation is an open script. That is, it's meant to be interpreted creatively and beautifully throughout time and space. This is one of the greatest miracles of the Qur'an. The Qur'an should be your anchor and open to act as your personal revelation. وَالْبَيْتِ الْمَعْمُورِ, the most frequented house. What then is your home that you take for protection and the command center for your choices in life? When you're facing life's challenges, to which home do you return for rest, recovery, and repose? Do you frequent the home of remembrance, vision, and patience, dhikr, sabr, and basira? Or do you frequent the home of self-delusion and denial? وَالسَّقْفِ الْمَرْفُوعِ, and the raised ceiling, or the exalted ceiling. What is your ceiling? Are you of those who aspire for God's countenance and for serving God's cause of moral development? Or are you detained by the mundane and simply aspire for basic appetites and pleasures? Do you seek quick and fleeting pleasures, or do you pursue the joy of elevation and progression? Are you committed to raising the ceiling of possibilities for moral, humanistic development? وَالْبَحْرِ الْمَسْجُورِ, and the overflowing seas. How do you react to the challenge of life? Life can be like sailing the sea. It's easy to get lost because there are not many landmarks, and you must follow your compass and the course that you have charted for yourself. You can find yourself in relatively calm waters, but then suddenly in mortal danger when the waves come crashing into one another. Do these moments of great challenge drop your ceiling to a very low height, where you are only concerned with yourself, your survival, and your comforts? Or are you like an explorer, daring to reach new heights and travel new distances that few have done before? How motivated are you to travel and explore the uncharted territory, to test your moral mettle against the endless challenges that arise in life? In verse 10, the ayah uses words like, وَتَسِيرُ الْجِبَالُ سَيْرًا, or the mountains will travel or move, which is it's very significantly related as a hint to the story of Moses and Tur Sina. It functions like a hint that the waves of the sea connect the puzzle of the mount of development, the Mount Tur Sina, the development of the human being. Tatwirul insan. Do you bravely confront the challenge of life and look forward to life's challenges as a means of serving God and His cause for moral progress? Are you prepared to embrace the pain and discomfort of life's challenges in order to facilitate the elevation of yourself and your society? These 7 verses are a puzzle that play off one another and give each other meaning. The Muslim's anchor and compass should be the commitment to moral development, and thus should find their home in the remembrance of God and the morality of the revelation, which will guide them on the challenging seas of life, the very medium by which a sojourner travels the path of spiritual wayfaring, sayr wa suluk, to God and to serving God's moral objectives. A central point to consider in these 6 verses is that the Quranic revelation is an open revelation that always remains relevant for the one that has sabr and basira, for the one who has perseverance and vision. Depending on how acquainted the wayfarer is with the layers of meaning of the Qur'an and how devoted the wayfarer is to God's cause rather than their own comforts and appetites, the Qur'an will reveal its secrets to the seeker. One begins to realize that the Qur'an has no ceiling, saqf marfu', and is the path to development and transcendence. Therefore, descriptions of heaven and hell may detain people, either because they hope for the satisfaction of their appetites, or they ponder on these verses skeptically as a means of impugning the character of the Qur'an, whether purposefully or not? Would you disregard the Qur'an's morally miraculous nature and be detained and ensnared by the red herrings and the puzzles of the Qur'an, which are meant to help you gauge your ceiling of aspiration? Famously in this surah, there is the verses that talk about Hur Ain, or the Ghilman, the boy servant, or as many have said, the wide-eyed maidens, and the vision of heaven that is about seeking to satisfy the appetites of food, eating and drinking, and all of the above. Do these red herrings stop you from understanding the puzzle? Is your saqf, is your roof so low that your motivations are satisfied simply by being able to eat and drink as much as you want? If in fact that is the case, then aim for that. But if you aim low, you will reach lower. But if you aim high, you may not reach the heights that you aim to achieve, but you will be much higher than that lower base self that you were meant to transcend. You know, Umar ibn Sa'ad, the son of the very famous companion, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, was appointed to be the commander of the Umayyad army by Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. And he was told that he must confront Hussein and to either fight and kill him if necessary, if Hussein did not give the Pledge of Allegiance. Of course, Umar was very nervous about doing that, and he said, well, what is in it for me? Why would I do that? Killing Hussein is a big deal. And they said, we'll give you the governorship of Ray. We will give you control of Iran, which I'm sure had a lot of emotional connections to Umar ibn Sa'ad, given the fact that his father was instrumental in the opening of Iran, of Ray. So when on the plains of Karbala, Imam al-Hussein recognizes Umar ibn Sa'ad's personality, how does he relate to him? Does he say to him, do you not recognize my position? Do you not recognize what you're doing is haram? Do you not recognize that you are playing with your afterlife here? Does he offer him something in the afterlife? No, in fact, he offers him his own milk and property and money. He said, I have property, Umar. I have property in Medina. I have money. Let us go. I'll give you what I own. And he said, you know, I know that the one that opposes you is going to have a very bad position in God's eye on the final day. But the thought that somebody else would take the governorship of Ray other than me, unacceptable. He didn't defect. He did not defect. Subhanallah. Vision. If you are in God's eye, فَإِنَّكَ بِأَعْيُنِنَا. If you are in God's eye, what do you see from God's eye? You are in God's eye. You are acquainted and you are facing the direction of what God is looking at. If you are in God's eye, can you see yourself with a sword to the throat of Imam al-Hussein? Or to Zaynab? You cannot be in God's eye if this is the case. If you're in God's eye, you have vision. You understand the challenge that God has put in front of you about transcendence, about growing above material means, about base desires, like food and drink and power and influence. So what did Zaynab see from God's eye? فَاصْبِرْ لِحُكْمِ رَبِّكَ. Wait and be patient for God's hukm, for His ruling, for His decision. فَإِنَّكَ بِأَعْيُنِنَا. In God's vision, if you are in God's vision and you have perseverance, you look like Zaynab. So when they ask you, what do you make of how we've killed you? Look, see, the Umayyads built a theology, and their theology was, after the arbitration between Ali and Muawiyah, in their opinion, God ruled in the favor of Muawiyah. Therefore, what does that mean? That means that Muawiyah had now won the position of Khalifatullah, the vicegerent and the executor of God's command on God's behalf. And anyone who does not obey and does not pay fealty and obedience, swear obedience to Khalifatullah, is by definition in khuruj, is by definition an apostate and a rebel and liable to be killed and liable to be enslaved. And someone specifically like Imam al-Hussein, who has the ability to incite in people the question of whether the Umayyads actually are khulafa, vicegerents of God, he has to be killed. He has to be seen as an apostate and a rebel. Look at the difference in vision. Look at the difference in vision. We don't know this if it wasn't for Zaynab responding. Because what Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad says is, look what Allah done to you and your family. You Ahlul Bayt rebelled against Allah. You Ahlul Bayt wanted power and you were jealous of us, Umayyads. God chose us above you and all you ever wanted was power. And that is a ludicrous lie. Imam al-Hussein and Zaynab and the family never wanted power. Never wanted power. The stand of Hussein and Zaynab was about choice, was about never submitting knowingly to someone who would commandeer the state or commandeer the religion and commandeer God as a means and an instrument to crush and quell dissent. That was the stand of Hussein. Hussein didn't stand up and say, I'm going to defeat the Umayyad army of 60,000. He wanted to live with his family, bi'ayunillah, in God's eye, and continue to persevere, and live to fight another day, or continue to guide Muslims in the right path. And that is what the Umayyads had to snuff out. And this is precisely the same theology today that is murdering Palestinians in Gaza. Precisely the same theology. There is no difference between the Umayyads and the Israelis. None. They're exactly the same. They have cornered everyone. They have cornered the true believers who simply said, you cannot force us by killing us and raping and pillaging. You cannot. We refuse. We refuse to pay fealty and to give affirmation that that is the way of the world. It's not the way of the world, and it is not God's way. But the theology of Israel is that we are chosen by God. We are the khulafa, and we will deal with any sort of rebellion the way that we deem fit. If you stand in our way, we will massacre you. Pay fealty or be massacred. Now ask yourself, in the Muslim world, who were the ones that paid fealty to Yazid? Who were the ones who paid fealty to Benjamin Netanyahu? And who were the ones who said no? Who said no? At any cost. No, at any cost. There is no more beautiful vision and perseverance and remembrance that this is all a test. If it mean that the most horrible picture you can imagine is the last photo taken of my body given by God as a trust, then I have used that body sown with bullets and dismembered in the best way that God would have wanted me to. That is vision. That is vision. That is what it means to be in God's eye. That it may look to the liars and the deniers and the cheats that, look, we have dismembered you, we've destroyed you, we've cut your head off, and we've cut your arms and legs off, and we've paraded it everywhere, and we've mocked you openly in front of everyone, the way that they try to do with Palestinians now today. But really what they are doing, they are plotting their own downfall. They are plotting a major downfall that will reverberate through history. For me, Palestinians are Husseinis. They are Zaynabiyun. And they said in the face of total evil, when they said to the Palestinians, "What do you make of this destruction? We've turned your home into a parking lot." They say, "Ma ra'aytu illa jamila." When they say, "Look what we've done with your children." "Ma ra'aytu illa jamila." You failed the test. And we passed the test. The most difficult test. How can you honor the memory of these heroes? Internalize the Qur'an. Love the Qur'an. Let the Qur'an become your heart. Make it so that your home is dhikr, remembering that which you saw from God's vision and persevering through whatever path, whatever land God leads you to test you, to examine what your heights are, what your ceiling is for human development. What can you envision for the future? What can your sacrifice mean? This is the true meaning of Surah Al-Tur. This is the true meaning of the stand of Zaynab and Hussein. And this is the true meaning of Islam. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. ربنا إننا سمعنا مناديا ينادي للإيمان أن آمنوا بربكم فآمنا ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار ربنا وآتنا ما وعدتنا على رسلك ولا تخزنا يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد. Ya Rabbi, allow us to never forget. Allow us to be the people of remembrance. Allow us to remember the message of the Palestinians and the message of Ahlul Bayt and the message of our Prophet and the message of our religion. Allow us to chart our course, to follow in their path, so that we may transcend these basic tests and become a better people, a better creation that Allah envisions for us. Let us gain the basira that Allah wishes for us to have. Put us, Ya Rab, in your eye. Put us, Ya Rab, in your eye. And help us to remember and to persevere in your path and to transcend. وصلي وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وأقم الصلاة.